Welcome to this explainer. I am so pumped you're joining us today because we are unpacking a truly fascinating sociological and technological audit from our source materials. We're going to explore what honestly seems like an impossible connection at first glance. We are going to look at exactly how an 18th century horseback ride connects directly to a looming 2026 crisis of centralized cloud computing. Look, I know that sounds like a wild leap shoot, but stick with me because the historical grounding of this event actually holds a legitimate, practical blueprint for our modern digital independence.
So, we're starting right in the thick of it, exactly where the historical record was set. I set off upon a very good horse. We're looking at this exact, visceral quote from Paul Revere's third written account of his mission to Lexington. The authors argue that this isn't just some neat piece of colonial trivia you learned in grade school. No, in the context of our sources, this specific document holds the structural blueprint for reclaiming our digital sovereignty. It perfectly captures the uncompromising reality of human intent colliding head-on with the physical world.
Okay, let's really dive into this. Revere's written account wasn't just a story for the history books. The sources frame it as an 18th century data availability layer. By writing his mission down, he broadcasted his undeniably real, physical effort, his metabolic human intent, making it a permanent, completely unchangeable record for anyone to witness. He essentially published his protocol directly into the public domain, right? Making his actions permanently verifiable.
To bridge that massive gap between colonial America and modern AI architecture, here is our cognitive map for today. We'll hit the Midnight Ride fixation, record versus the substrate, the Royalist cloud enclosure, the 1689 breach, and finally, restoring agentic sovereignty.
Let's kick things off right away with Section 1, the Midnight Ride fixation. Picture this historical artifact right at the Paul Revere House in Boston. Just imagine a delicate, cream-colored museum text panel mounted directly onto a solid, incredibly rough red brick wall. The source points out that this specific visual of text bolted to brick perfectly illustrates the core conflict of our modern digital age. Think about it. It's a meticulously preserved record of an event that literally changed history, sitting heavily against completely unyielding physical reality.
And that brings us perfectly to Section 2, record versus the substrate.
This brilliantly illustrates the principle of non-separability. You've got the cream panel representing the record. That's the software, the pure human intent, the mission itself. But it's bolted directly onto the red brick wall, which represents the substrate, the raw silicon, the actual physical hardware execution. The absolutely crucial point here is that pure human intent is completely meaningless without the hard physical execution of that substrate. You can't just decouple an idea from its physical execution if you actually want to change reality.
Now, this intense level of exactness brings us to a beautifully complex philosophical word, hausickity. It basically defines the absolute unique thisness of a sovereign pilot acting in the real world. True sovereign action requires this undeniable physical event, like a specific man on a specific horse at exactly 10 p.m., rather than just being some probabilistic algorithm guessing at answers in the ether of cloud computing. It means the action is permanently, irreversibly anchored in physical reality.
So what happens when massive tech monopolies hide that physical substrate from you? Let's get into Section 3, the Royalist cloud enclosure.
The sources argue that modern cloud AI acts as a literal Royalist enclosure. It essentially rebrands computing into a centralized, metered utility. This system actively strips your local execution power away and traps you in what the authors call the miasma, this completely opaque probabilistic guessing game. And worse, it forces an interface inversion, meaning instead of you commanding the computer locally, the machine dictates the terms to you. It effectively reduces human pilots to passive digital tenants who are just renting space from an agentic king.
To truly understand this technological power grab, we have to look at the sociology of computation through a massive historical lens. Section 4, the 1689 breach.
Look closely at this timeline, because it tracks a deeply cyclical sociological battle. Back in 1689, the Orange Pledge breached the absolute power of centralized monarchs, demanding localized rights and returning agency back to the individual. Fast forward to today, and the source argues we are hurtling toward a 2026 great enclosure of cloud AI, a massive new centralization of power. Just like in 1689, individual actors will have to relentlessly fight back against this modern agentic king to maintain their sovereignty. It's the classic struggle, Centralized powers constantly attempt to enclose resources, while local individual actors have to fight to break out.
So, how exactly do we break out of this digital enclosure? Let's move to our final section, Section 5, Restoring Agentic Sovereignty.
The researchers perfectly pit these two paradigms against each other to show us the way out. On the top, you've got the current push for artificial intelligence, right? It operates as agentic kingship in a centralized cloud, leaving you with nothing but a metered utility. But look at the bottom row. The symmetric resolution to this is artificial life. It relies entirely on a local hardware substrate, and that is what restores agentic sovereignty. This framework demands local execution on your very own hardware chassis, which yields an inalienable record. Bottom line, it puts you firmly back in the pilot seat.
So here's how this actually builds into a real-world workflow. By wielding a modern agentic typewriter, like a secure command line interface or Metagit CLI, you bypass the foggy cloud entirely. You, the sovereign pilot, apply pure, explicit text intent. Then, your local AI agent reads this perfectly lossless text, acting as a rigid deterministic scripter. It translates your code into high-fidelity physical execution right at your local edge. No guessing, no probabilistic hallucinations, just your exact mandate. And to prove the absolute mathematical certainty of this local control, our source documents reveal a test case of a pilot coordinating a modern digital swarm. Using local code, this system executed exactly 66 precise automated strikes. This completely proves the relentless, undeniable metronome of a localized system. Every single automated maneuver was completely free from the probabilistic hallucinations of modern AI chatbots. It kept the data perfectly, mathematically uncorrupted.
But here's the real kicker. This flawless digital truth translated directly into a 581-kilometer physical journey in the real world. That literal physical distance proves that when you firmly marry your local code to your own hardware substrate, your digital intent gains undeniable real-world momentum. We are not talking about theoretical data floating in a server farm. It is tangible action driven purely by your sovereign command.
So I'm going to leave you with this final provocative thought to really chew on. As the great enclosure of the cloud attempts to completely wall off your digital reality, what are you going to do? Will you passively accept the automated miasma and wrench your capabilities from an invisible king? Or will you claim your rightful role as a sovereign pilot, saddle up your own hardware substrate, and ride? The choice is entirely yours. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning the systems around you, and I will catch you next time.